Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. Hey, what is up, 8-Bit crew? Today is Thursday, August 20th, 2020, and this is episode 4 of the 8-Bit Instructor. Welcome back. I've got a great show lined up for you. Later on in the show, I sit down and talk to John Meehan from Edrenaline Rush. We sat down and talked a little bit about managing social justice issues in the classroom and how to deal with that, along with some gamification ideas. Later on, we'll look at some feedback and the question of the week for this week. But before we do that, we've got a lot of Google news and updates, and then we'll check out what's in the treasure chest today. So for news and updates, just a personal update real quick. If any of you are teaching online at the beginning of this year, doing some virtual instruction, I have a Udemy course about setting up and using Google Classroom for your class. So if you're not very familiar with how to use Google Classroom, if you need a good tutorial, you can check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes for the course, and if you use the promo code August65, you can get 35% off of the price of the course. Or if you are one of the first 10 to register with promo code VIRTUAL, you can get it for absolutely free. So be quick on that. Check that out. Utilize that to help you with some of that online learning this year. Now, Google has a lot of updates this week, so I'm going to try to hit some of the highlights of it and then link to some articles that you can read for further information. So first of all, they're updating a lot of things for the 2020 election process. So they've integrated some new search features. So if you go on Google and do a Google search for how to register to vote, it will give you information about voting registration in your state, so deadlines and requirements and options and all that kind of stuff. If you do a Google search for how to vote, it will also give you some guidance and things like ID requirements for voting, different means of voting. They're partnering up with a few different third-party, nonpartisan organizations to make this process a whole lot easier in helping people get more informed about the election process. They are working to make sure that the information available is accurate information as best as possible, putting out new policies and connecting people to the democratic process. They're updating the 2020 elections experience on Google News. So that is something that you might want to check out, but also maybe some of your students. I know I'm teaching seniors this year. I've got a couple of classes of seniors, and some of them will actually be eligible to vote in November. So one of my goals at the beginning of this year is to try to help them understand that democratic process and help them to make informed decisions as best as possible. Now, switching over to Google for Education, Google just had their Anywhere School, which is kind of their back to school experience. They're releasing a lot of new features for a lot of the different G Suite apps. So just to hit some of the highlights, they're updating Google Meet to provide a safer, more engaging experience. So they'll be rolling out over the next few months several different things, larger tiled views so you can view up to 49 people, and integrating Jamboard in with Google Meet to have an interactive, whiteboard experience there. They'll be improving some of the privacy, like being able to blur out background, doing breakout rooms, being able to take attendance in Google Meet. later on too for the G Suite Enterprise for Education. They'll have like a hand raising feature. So for taking questions or for doing a quick poll, that will be available there. Google Classroom has several updates. There's a new to-do widget in classes now so that students can easily see what's coming up, what's due, what might be missing, what has been graded. You can now share links to join a class rather than having to just rely on the code. So that makes it a little bit easier, a single click for students to join. They're also integrating, for those of you who use Infinite Campus, which is my district, Google Classroom and Infinite Campus can now be synced together, which means when you grade something in Google Classroom, you will be able to send it straight to your gradebook in Infinite Campus. That is an add-on that districts will have to purchase. So it is a great feature. I know a lot of teachers in our district are excited about that. So if that is something, if your district uses Infinite Campus and you use Google Classroom, if a lot of teachers you do use that, then that might be something you might want to look into. It's an awesome feature. I can't wait to get that going. For people who are using other LMS systems, Google Assignments now is available to integrate into some of those other systems. So if you're on a platform like Canvas, Schoology, Blackboard, or something like that, you can use Google Assignments if you're not using Google Classroom to integrate some of the Google Drive, Google Docs kind of features in there. So if you're on one of those platforms, check out Google Assignments. For Google Docs, they've updated some things to help students with the writing process. So they have recently launched Smart Compose and Auto Correct for educators and students just to help that writing process. But one of the things that I'm kind of excited about is they're going to be integrating a citations tool directly into Google Docs. So that helps out. I'm always having to send students to other apps or things like that. So being able to do the citation stuff right there inside of Docs will be super helpful. And then the last thing I'll kind of look at is they've released some new resources and tools to help families out. So Google has released these tech toolkits. So there's one for families and guardians to help parents and guardians understand kind of the educational technology tools that are available, things that they probably did not use when they were in school. And so it gives them kind of a tech toolkit, as it were, to understand how technology is being used in their students' classroom. So check those out. I will link to some articles in the show notes that you can read for some further information. But I'm going to have to stop because I see a new treasure chest. So what do you say we crack that bad boy open up and see what's inside? This week's treasure chest contains a site that is helpful for those of you who use a lot of image stuff in your classes. The site is remove.bg. If you've done any image stuff with Google Slides or any other graphic kind of things, you know sometimes that you save a picture and then when you put it onto a slide, it has like a white background, say, or some kind of, color background that kind of ruins the overall aesthetic of the slide. So remove.bg will remove the background. So let's say you got a logo that you want to put on there, but it's got a white background on it. Remove.bg will take that white background off, and then you're just left with just that logo or icon. It's super helpful, super easy to use. It only takes a matter of maybe about 30 seconds to remove that background and save it, and then you're good to go. So check out remove.bg to help you out with some of those images. So next up, we've got quite the beast of a boss battle coming up. So fortunately, I've got reinforcements. John Meehan and I sit down and we tackle the idea of social justice next. with me, I have John Meehan, who's a teacher and a ed tech gamification kind of guru, right? So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me. So I am an instructional coach in Arlington, Virginia, and I teach 11th grade English. I think that we don't really teach content, we teach kids, we teach people. And so we figured out what makes kids excited to learn and can make them jump through hoops of fire, whether it's in Mario or Minecraft or Macbeth. So That's what we got. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Good. And I also hear that you wrote a book, right?
That is a thing that happened, yeah. I wrote a book called Edrenaline Rush, like adrenaline, like educational Edrenaline Rush, which is all about game-changing student engagement inspired by theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms. It was published by people from Dave Burgess Consulting. They're amazing. And it's been out for about a year, and it's about ways to use playful learning in your classroom to get kids excited to, sorry for the pun, to change the game. It's getting excited.
Yeah. And personally, I've read it. I got a lot out of it. Really enjoyed it. So definitely pick that up.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So before we get started into the serious educational stuff, I like to have a little bit of fun.
All right.
So I got a little would you rather.
Let's go.
Would you rather have to deal with being attacked by a giant snake or an angry piranha?
Oh, I'm all in for angry piranha. I'm so out for snake. I think I'm scared of snakes, and it's funny because I don't think I've ever actually seen one, but and that's a weird thing to say. Like, how do you live a life without seeing a snake? Like, I don't know, maybe in a zoo one time I might have seen a snake, but they always have their house that says like reptile house, and you're like, no, I don't want to go in that one, thanks. So, like, I consciously avoid it. But I think I'm scared of snakes because of the movie Indiana Jones, and it's not because snakes in that were scary. It's because he was like rough and tumble. He was an adventure hero, and he was scared of snakes. So, in my early cognition, I was like, oh, heroes are supposed to be scared of snakes. Done. Check. So, like, you eat spinach because Popeye eats spinach, and you're scared of snakes because Indiana Jones. Never once actually having seen one, but yeah, I'm all in for the piranha. Keep me away from those serpentine things.
Nice. All right. Now, part of my idea with this podcast too is kind of like this idea of educational journey.
Okay.
So we're going to be looking at some of the idea of like social justice in the classroom. But before we get into that, can you give us like a quick little kind of synopsis of how did you get into education and kind of where you are now?
To make the money, obviously, right? So I was actually a career changer. I was like, I'm not making nearly enough money in my other job, so let me get into teaching. I really am a career changer. That part is true. And in 2010, the economy started to take a dip, and I was in media and marketing, event planning, and like social. I was doing social media, and I was doing fine, but it was not ever to be like a forever job. It was to be like a for now job. I just wrapped up my master's degree, and I was like, I want to tell stories. I want to write. I want to be able to do the things that I went to school for, which is English, and I love that stuff. And I said, well, maybe if I take a job that gives me the summers off, then I can spend more time doing the creative endeavors. And I got into teaching will give you your summers off, right? Wrong. You're working even harder in the summers. But I loved it. I found out I fell in love with it easily because it gave a chance to tell a story. And because I worked in media and marketing, I was bringing my story to people who were like paying customers for an event to like be a part of your social or whatever it is. And I was like, well, you can do the same thing in English class. You just talk about Shakespeare and now get kids excited to, quote, pay money, to buy in, to pay attention. And that led me into the teaching research of Paulo Freio's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is that idea that the banking model of education is actually a really bad one, that you're forcing kids to pay attention so you can give them grades, reward them with grades. And that then led me down the rabbit hole of, we talk about Carol Dweck and mindset, and the idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. That's all about Daniel Pink. And I'm like, now I'm geeking out about, okay, well, how do I do this the right way? Authentic, making people see themselves as heroes of their own stories. And that to me was like the brilliant, kind of alchemy of all of it coming together, is I wanted to tell stories. But better yet, I wanted to live stories. And I wanted my students to feel like they were living the stories. And that was, I think, a very early, I was lucky because I had no idea what I was doing. So I was not embarrassed if I did it wrong. And then I just kept leaning in and kept asking those questions. And so, like a video game, you try, you die, you fail again. That was really kind of what led me into teaching. And I started my career working in the public schools in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is achievement gap high schools, 87% free and reduced meals. I love that work, but I also was involved with Catholic social justice through college. I was a big like mission work and volunteer work, Habitat for Humanity, stuff like that, student ministry, and my faith was important to me. So when the opportunity came to work at a Catholic school in the area, I made that move, and through that I got into instructional coaching, and now I really, that's the origin story of all of the disparate pieces that kind of came together in the puzzle that is my classroom.
Yeah, that's cool. I see a lot of the similar things that line up with like kind of my story too, because I'm a second career teacher. I was originally youth ministry, and I was kind of that same thing, that idea of summers off, creative endeavors.
Right.
I was playing in a band at the time.
Nice.
I could have the whole summer to like write and tour and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
It didn't exactly work out.
Nope.
That way.
I thought, teachers, they have their nights and their weekends off. How bad could that be, right?
Right.
But you have no free energy to do anything other than, because if you think your teacher only works 40 hours a week, like I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. It's so funny, and it's so true, because so many teachers are very creative people, and they're very motivated people, a lot of runners, a lot of like people who are very type A, they are very self-driven, self-motivated. But you really give all of yourself to your students, and you come back and you're just like, I'm exhausted. If you build with bricks all day, you don't have to carry those bricks and put them on your chest when you sit on the couch. Unfortunately, when you deal with humans all day, the beauty is you're dealing with real people with real emotions, and then you carry those emotions afterwards, and you need time to unpack that, unwind that. And that's not when you write a story or a song. It's you really just have to sit with it, and that takes time.
Yeah. So today, we're kind of looking at this idea of social justice, and I know just from kind of looking on Twitter, I know you've been pretty involved with a lot of kind of social justice issues that's been going on this year, specifically. So what I wanted to talk about is bringing that some into the classroom, because we're equipping students to leave our rooms and go out and, not just know how to read Shakespeare, but to actually be ready to make a difference in the world. So I guess to start off, what do you think, what are some things that we could do in class to kind of begin equipping them to handle some of these social justice issues that we're starting to see?
Yeah.
Be aware of.
Right, that's exactly it. Someone said, George Floyd is a wake-up call. They said, no, he's the latest alarm. We've been hitting that snooze button for a really long time. And again, like I said, as a career changer, I went to school in Washington, D.C., and I started my teaching in the New Teacher Project, TNTP, but before that I was working in the No Child Left Behind schools, and I got to see inside of the achievement gap what it looks like, and see this thing we call an achievement gap is often an opportunity gap. That certain groups of people have been systemically designed to, or denied or marginalized opportunities. And it's not that they're achieving less, it's that they're achieving to the best of what has been afforded or provided to them. And that's not a failure just of a school system, it's a failure of questions of human dignity and affronts to human dignity. As educators, black, white, gay, straight, old, young, rich, poor, we should not feel afraid to say, you may not be politically left of center, and you don't have to be, but black lives do matter. And unless you are able to say that phrase, Black Lives Matter, then you can't, truthfully, as an English teacher, say all lives matter, right? Syllogism. If all lives matter and black lives are a part of all lives, then we have to have those conversations. And again, I work in a Catholic school, so I also have to be very careful, because my faith is more important to me than my nation, and I might catch some flack for that. But that to me is, ultimately I have one test I will be graded on, and that guy, he has all the answers, and that Scantron, you don't really get any retakes. So I have to be very right with that. But also as a public figure, a semi-public figure who wrote a book, who does educational consulting, I have the opportunity to use my platform to affect real change, or at least real opportunity for people to know, hey, I'm not alone when I feel these questions. And I think it's there's a dereliction of duty if I do not step up and say, hey, this is an issue that I feel really strongly about. And I'm not doing it out of political reasons. I'm not here to say, oh, get rid of this guy in that office or blah, 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 blah. Like, I believe that good teaching is, by nature, a provocative thing. And it forces students to ask hard questions. So again, a very long answer to your very short question, which is, I think we have to raise students who are thinkers. If that means that they all end up being Republican or Democrat, God bless them. But if you give a project and you get 30 of the same responses, you didn't give a project, you gave a recipe. And I don't want to give my kids the recipe, right? I want to give them the provocation. And as like a provocateur, like, I don't know, here's what we're going to talk about. And we need to talk about it. Because like I said, I use English as an example. English and history, there's no reason why you should not be able to have these conversations in class. But like, we don't teach Macbeth, right? We teach revenge. We don't teach Hamlet. We teach suicide. We don't teach Romeo and Juliet. We teach, sexual development, and like, what does it mean to come into your own and see who you are? And the reason why we study all these old books is because they reveal very new, very ever-present truths about the human condition. And I look at my classes like they're philosophy classes always. And I hope in listening to this, you hear like, that's not a Republican or a Democrat thing. That's just like, who are you? What type of person do you want? What value system do you hold? And I think that's the thing that a lot of teachers really can get behind is what is it about reading that makes you want to be a better person, or science? What does it mean to be an explorer, a person who commits to discovery, a person who commits to the scientific method and research, as a historian? What is it, that fascination? Because you want to raise a generation of students who says, this is not what The Great Gatsby was all about, but rather this is what it means to think critically, to be analytical, to be curious, to approach things with wonder and discovery and joy. And I think if we can do that in our classrooms, there are many like everyday opportunities that present with that. Like, hey, here's the latest news story. What do you guys think about that? Just asking someone what they think. That's how you meet girls. That's how you meet boys. That's how you meet friends. Like,
right.
Hey, what would you do in this situation? You started the conversation with me. Would you rather do a piranha thing or a snake thing? Like, it's a dumb way to laugh together, even in a small like game, that there are no wrong answers. I just want to see, why do you think that? Let's talk a little further. If I would have said snakes, we'll talk about snakes. If I would have said piranhas, great, we'll talk about piranhas. But in the end, we're still talking about fear, right? We're still talking about desire. And that transcends age, race, sexuality, gender. So I think that's really, really a powerful way to leverage some of those tools in the classroom.
Okay. So let's say as a teacher, if I was kind of wanting to get into some of that kind of stuff, I know personally I've dealt with potential issues with students in class, getting out of hand or getting a little excessive with what they say, I guess, when we try to approach these topics, because they are, they're hot button issues. They are, very emotionally packed kind of ideas. So if somebody was wanting to do this or kind of talk about this, but is a little hesitant, a little wary, what are some maybe tips or advice you think could help them to start implementing these ideas in class?
This is where I shield the book, and I was like, I wrote a book about this. But I do talk about it in the book, as was the only one I mentioned. I didn't come up with it, so feel free to just skip the chain and get to where the research came from. But there was a physicist by the name of David Bohm, 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 and he's brilliant. Like, how many times do you get to tell your kids you read a book by a real life rocket scientist, right? Bohm wrote a very short treatise. It's like an essay. So it's a philosophical bent. It's not a teaching book. It's an essay, and if it's bound in pages, it's probably like, I don't know, a 90-page book. But you can tell people you read a book, and I read it on a plane after an instructional coaching conference. And the book is actually not about astrophysics. It's called On Dialogue, and it's an essay about how dialogue works and where dialogue comes from. And I loved this because it changed the way I thought about teaching. If I was to say to you, hey, I'm going to give a shout, Lee, we're going to talk today, we'll have a discussion, have a dialogue. I presumed before reading the book that a discussion and a dialogue were the same thing. And in class, I often had discussions. We're going to discuss The Great Gatsby. We're going to have a discussion about Macbeth. We're going to discuss Their Eyes Are Watching God, or discuss the Harlem Renaissance. But what Bohm says on the first pages of the book, which is just, it radically shaped everything that it echoed Paulo Freire, it echoed Carol Dweck. It talked about the pedagogy of the oppressed. It talked about the Christopher Emdin, why the students who are white and the students who are black hear the same message differently, like how they come from their church traditions or family traditions. There's so much about, all of it packed in. And what Bohm said, which was beautiful, and to the point where I literally closed the book and I put it down, I said, wow, I have to change everything. Because a dialogue and a discussion, even though we use them interchangeably, are not the same thing. You hear the word discussion, and it has the same root word as concussion and percussion. It means to strike. If you dialogue, it's not a strike, but a discussion is we come together to hit stuff. There's winners, there's losers. I'm right, you're wrong, we debate. Talk about partisanship or tribalism in the United States, this idea that my idea is the only idea, and it kind of carries the day. And it becomes then a game of who wins and who loses. That's what the discussion is all about. A dialogue, however, comes from the Greek words dia and logos meaning words, and dia, which I thought meant two, right? Like biped or diped. But dia doesn't mean two, it means through. Almost like the Latin word via, by way of this. And what it is, and Bohm spends the book sort of spelling this out, is it is a shared, deeper understanding, dialogos, through words. Together, if this is a game, there is one winner, and that is us. If anyone wins, we all win. So when you say whatever you said, now this is very an improv game way of saying it. Oh, that's a yes and. I see what you're saying. And I want to add to that, and I want to keep peeling back because. And even when I push you back, I say, what you have said makes sense in this context. I have some questions about this next context because I'm validating your experience, and then it's very empathetic. So it says, rather than being a team sport of blue team versus red team, it's we as a class are trying to get to the deeper meaning of this text or of this issue. And the only way we do this is if we pass the ball to each other. We don't just all take our shot. So the team then starts to work together, and I was really, really inspired and empowered by that. There's an awesome tool called Equity Maps you can use on the iPad. It's $3.99, and it takes your Socratic seminar, and it keeps a stopwatch on who is talking when. And then afterwards, you get a full data dashboard of, Billy talked for 3 minutes, and Janie talked for 2 minutes, and Bobby talked for 1 minute. And it gives you breakdowns of how evenly you spread the ball around, who talked the most. Because simply talking a lot doesn't mean that we've won the game. In fact, if one person's ball hogging, the team sport has lost. And so I was like, oh man, well that's great. So that changes everything. Now you have a conversation about, what do you think Huckleberry Finn would say about Black Lives Matter? And go. And now it's a 40-minute discussion where they're not talking about their opinions. They're talking about, as informed by the character, we are trying to, quote, beat this game. And then new layers or new levels of that rich analytics afterwards. Let's look at what our numbers look like, guys. Are we happy with this? Do we want to spread it around more? What could we do individually to deepen this conversation, to strengthen our things, to validate one another? And it's that's where playful learning really can take a front seat, because there's so much agency and autonomy and consent when people have the ability to say, hey, this is a hard topic, but I am in control at all times of what I am saying, and I can control how I react. So I really will start the year off with a conversation about how we have conversations, and then really let students make a mess just about piranhas or snakes, right? Just that chance to join in.
Okay, yeah, cool. Now, with all that being said, have you seen anything or noticed things going on recently that really encouraged you about how this stuff is going? It's easy to see a lot of the negative kind of things that are happening.
Sure.
What are maybe some encouraging things that you've noticed?
Well, I mean, on my own mental health journey, one of my counselors one time told me, he said, the world is, you can track it. You feel bad about stuff, it feels like the world's falling apart. He's like, but the world is inherently more empathetic today. And if you need proof for something to point to that the world is inherently more empathetic today than it was 5 weeks ago, 5 years ago, 5 decades ago, you can't be openly thing X that is offensive, right? We don't sit there and justify, just be casually sexist or casually racist. We are being hyper aware that and I know people who are listening might feel like, there's certain political candidates who play to one side or another, but generally speaking, if someone came into work and did that type of thing and was not an elected official, you would say, we don't want to do business with this person. This doesn't feel comfortable. And I'm not sitting there and saying cancel culture is the answer, because there's a lot of problems with that for sure too. Right. But certain things deserve to be canceled and called out. And if they're changing the name of a Washington football team that for the past 3 years in every podcast I've ever appeared on, I have not mentioned that team by name, but I have mentioned them as the Washington football team. And in my classroom, when we read Huckleberry Finn, I have discussed the Washington football team as an example of contemporary microaggression. Like that sands of time has run out in that hourglass. So there are small examples of, and those are very, very small, like taking down certain monuments, changing the names of certain places, changing state flags. Though those are not the solution, they are signposts that we have, as a society, moved past a thing. And I think that comes to a point where if in your lifetime you see that change, there's an upheaval, there's a discomfort that comes from that. But then the generation behind you, they grew up in a world where they never thought about it in otherwise. Have you ever watched the YouTube videos of kids trying to use dial-up phones, like the rotary phones?
Yeah.
It's amazing because they have no idea how to do it, because they've never had to hear a dial tone. They never had to hear a busy signal. They never had to pick a phone up and then like push. And I think that's so cool, because if it is come and gone before your time, we just take it as a matter of course. That feels discomforting, and there is that upheaval, but like there's no growth without discomfort. That's how working out works, that's how sports work, and that's how change needs to happen. So I think playing that long view is very, reassuring. It can be overwhelming, but I heard a story about Navy SEALs who get through Hell Week. They said most of the people quit Hell Week because they just can't wait for it to be over. The ones who survive are the ones who just need to get to lunch, and I think that there's a lot of research about that. They call it the Stockdale paradox in the book Good to Great. The people who get through stuff are simultaneously aware that it will be very hard, but they maintain fixed focus that they will get through it.
Awesome. Well, we have a few minutes left, so let's jump over a little bit to some of the gamification stuff.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of that. What would be, give us a quick breakdown, give me an elevator pitch of what you would say gamification is.
Okay. So gamification is using elements inspired by traditional games to increase motivation, pleasure, and engagement in non-game things. So like frequent flyer miles make you want to fly more on the same airline, or Starbucks points makes you want to go back to the same thing because you get a free coffee. And without dangling sticks and carrots, because people are either not hungry for your carrot or they're not afraid of the stick, it gives you that micro-credentialing, that micro-feedback, maybe those micro-badges, and you feel like you're leveling up your skills. So it feels okay that the second and the third level is a little harder. There's an inherent fairness to it, but each student moves at their own pace. So gamification is really injecting traditional things that are not games with elements borrowed from games to make them a little bit more, spoonful of sugar.
Okay. So I think a lot of people sometimes think when they hear the word gamification, they think it means I played games in class. But it's more than that, right?
It is, and I think, every time I hear these presentations, I hate having to spend 30 seconds on it, but it bears saying. There's a difference between game-based learning and gamification. Game-based learning is, hi everybody, come on in, we're playing Jeopardy today. That's game-based. For the duration of today's class, we are playing game-based. Gamification is borrowing elements from games, and I'm not just being pedantic and splitting words here. Traditional school is gamified. There are levels, right? There are points. There are winners. There are losers. But if you look at the foundational structure of how that game is designed, there's only one way to play it. There's no autonomy. There's no agency. There's very little room for creativity, choice, and freedom. And so it was designed for a certain type of student at a certain time. That is a game that if you sat down to design today, you wouldn't design it that way. So I think I kind of have to dispel that idea of it's just sitting around and playing with toys. We can play with toys, that's part of it, but it doesn't have to be. We even that example of the equity maps, that's gamified, right? You get your score as a team. We've spread the ball around 80%. The boys talk 14% more than the girls. Are we happy with those numbers? You go to your gym, you go to your CrossFit, you go to your workouts, and you get feedback. Hey, you did 15 steps today. You walked the length of the Eiffel Tower. Things like that are, quote, gamified. You don't realize you're playing the game, but they're tapping into, again, those pleasure centers in your brain, feeling that dopamine and feeling that excitement so you can move like you want to see change affected.
Right, so it's not like you have to have a complete overhaul of what you're doing in your class,
nope.
right?
Nope.
Yeah. So if somebody was interested in doing some stuff like this, but maybe a little bit intimidated. I think sometimes when people hear gamified classroom, it's that intimidation factor of having to do a ton of stuff and restructuring everything. What would you say maybe some small steps to even just get started into it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about points, badges, and leaderboards. I'm not talking about XP where you level up your Dungeons & Dragons level 17 mage. I'm not talking about video games and onlines. You don't have to be a deep dive gamer dork to enjoy playful learning. I think we all have a spirit of play in our house, whether it's Monopoly or Clue, or you've played Candy Crush, or you like soccer, or you watch football. Those are games. There are elements of those that you can borrow to your classes. And the one I'll use as a simple example is I created a pedagogy. You can grab website templates ready to go. It's a plug and play. You can use it in your lesson today. Any content, any course, any grade level. I call it a QR break-in. And the QR break-in, you can use the hashtag on Twitter. It's QR break-in. You can find it. But people have adapted it for all over because what it is old school centers turn into a game. Old school centers typically were, 3, 2, 1, rotate between center 1 and then center 2. So you would go from the blocks center to the drawing center, elementary school. And I was like, the problem with that is when you say the old school stations 3, 2, 1, rotate, there's a group who's been done for 20 minutes and they've been hanging out at the block station doing nothing, talking about the Kardashians or talking about, floor is lava. And then there's another group who you said 3, 2, 1, rotate. They're not done yet and they were maybe drawing, they haven't finished, but oops, too bad, you wasted your time. You only have 5 minutes the next station. So instead, I make it like a Montessori school on steroids. And it's, hey guys, we got 8 different stations you can work on at any time today. Our goal is to get all of these stations done by Wednesday. Work at your own pace. Work as a team. Don't care. When you think you have the right answer for that thing, you've hit the work product limit, call me over. If it is, check mark, moving on to the next one. But I don't care whether you play with the blocks, before you play with the Legos, before you play with the drawing, before you play with the graphic organizer. In the end, I made the menu, so I know that everything on the menu is an instructional thing that's valid for the class. And hey, at the block station, you have to build me what photosynthesis looks like. When you think you have it, call me over. If you're stuck, watch that YouTube video. At the YouTube station, watch a YouTube video so you can learn a little bit. After you've watched it, write down 10 things you think are most important about this. When you think you're right, call me over. Again, if they get it right, they've earned the right to work on the next station. If they get it wrong, they get right on the spot feedback. So I spend most of my classroom day really just being like a referee or a float and letting the students be the players. That's not that I'm the idiot or I'm the bad guy. I'm angry at them. It's, wow, this game is hard. And I kind of want to beat the other team because I see that they're getting some work done, so I can give that feedback on the spot. And if a team is racing way ahead, like in Mario Kart, I ask them much harder questions. Ooh, you made this out of, can you explain why? Why did you use green bricks instead of red bricks? Just slowing their progress a little bit. Because then the game stays close and fair, while a team who falls out of it is never like Jeopardy, oh, I can't win, so I quit. It's like, no, we can rubber band everybody back in. So you can use that on a day to introduce your syllabus. Hey, you have 10 things you need to do. You have to sign up for the text alerts. You have to take a survey about it. And then just breaking those modular tasks up so it reimagines how we approach our lesson design. And it feels more like a game design, like a game plan. But games can be flexible and games can change. And that's okay.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all the time we have. But one last thing before we go.
Okay.
This is, the 8-bit instructor, nerd culture and all that. You just talked about people love games, so hit us with what is your favorite game, or kind of at the moment? Man,
so I guess I would pick their favorite child. All school, all time, I think my favorite game to have played ever is The Legend of Zelda on 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. I think it does everything that a good game should do, which is it doesn't tell you anything, and it expects you're going to die finding out how to do it the right way. There's so much choice, there's so much voice, there's so much autonomy. Even the fact that the main character's name is Link, he's literally you. You are linked into the game through the avatar. And over the generations, 40 years of evolutions of the game, every other character gets a voice and a story. Link's story is your story. And you don't hear him talk because you see yourself as him. It gives you a sense that failure is part of this world and that's okay. And it really helps bring people in. So there's a bunch of other great games, sports and clubs and stuff, but I can't beat old school Legend of Zelda for the NES.
Right. Actually, I have several episode ideas stemming from the Legend of Zelda series.
Let's go. I would love to come back, brother.
Yeah. My daughter and I are playing Twilight Princess right now.
Ooh, nice. I'm working my way through the Breath of the Wild, but I had to stop during COVID, because I knew if I didn't stop, I would only play this for like 7 weeks at a clip. So I had to take a break because it really can consume. And that's what good games do. They hit that flow state. You get addicted to it. You don't realize that, the challenge is ramping up as your skill is ramping up. And that's what good school games should do. That's what good school should do, rather than just, hey, you're 16 years old, so you must be in, grade 11. There's so much more we can do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate that. And again, where can people get connected with you if they want to learn more information?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Lee. So I'm on Twitter at Meehan, EDU. That's like my last name, Meehan, EDU, like education. And I have a website, www.edrenalinerush.com, like educational Edrenaline Rush. I have a bunch of templates and resources you can plug and play, save copies of everything there, recipes, workbooks. It'll take you, do it in any way you need to, because we can all put the house rules on our own games and put that own spin on it, and do what works for your kids. And let me know how I can help.
Awesome. And I'll get that information up in the show notes.
Amazing.
Thanks so much, John.
Hey, I appreciate it, Lee. Stay safe, yeah?
So before we get into this week's question of the week, I did want to give a quick little update from the recording of that interview. My daughter and I did finish playing Twilight Princess, and she absolutely loved it. So now we're working through Breath of the Wild. So a little video game nerd update for you guys out there. For this week's question of the week, what I want to know is how do you plan to maybe handle some social justice issues in your classroom? Maybe you haven't really had those discussions before. Are there ways that you plan on discussing those in class? And if so, like how do you plan on handling it, especially in today's context? A lot of the social justice issues have become really politicized and can very quickly escalate because of emotions. So what are some of the things that you plan on doing? I know one of the things that I'm going to try to implement at the beginning of the year is this thing I came across called a Charter for Compassion, and it's kind of like a charter that the students would help put together to look at some practical ways that they can show compassion to others, and then I plan on utilizing that to refer back to as we discuss things in class. So let me know, what are some of your tips, some of your strategies, some of your ideas. You can use the 8-Bit Crew hashtag on Twitter, tag me at Comic Socks, or you can post some up on the episode page at 8bitinstructor.com. Well, that will just about wrap up this episode. Many thanks again to John Meehan for joining me today. Make sure to connect with him on Twitter at MeehanEDU. Check out his website, adrenalinerush.com, and check out the book, Edrenaline Rush. It's a great way to add some energy into your classroom. Next week, I'm going to dive into the world of video games, and we're going to take a lesson from The Legend of Zelda, actually, and look at how we might apply that into our classrooms. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to connect with me on Twitter at Comic Socks and use the hashtag 8BitCrew. Check out my YouTube channel for EdTech tutorials and the blog on the website 8bitinstructor.com. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review on your podcasting app. But more importantly, make sure you tell some of your fellow educators out there about the show and help us all get connected together. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/8bitinstructor. Keep working on leveling up your teaching craft and finding your authentic self in the classroom. And until next week, keep your sword sharp and your shield strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter @ComicSocks and use the hashtag 8BitCrew. See you next week.